The Senate has admitted that Nigeria is in a dire food crisis that requires emergency measures to end. To tackle the problem, the Senate says all options, including the importation of food to ease the hunger in the land, are on the table. Senate's solution to the current food crisis in the country followed a report of its joint committee's interaction with Nigeria's economic managers. Omo Bazwaye reports.
The cry of hunger pervading the land finally reached the ears of the Nigerian Senate on Tuesday. This was as federal lawmakers deliberated on a report of its joint committee asking the federal government to invest more in agriculture and to create an enabling environment for farmers to ease hunger and related economic hardship in the country. The Senate committee report is a loaded 9-page document that prefers solution to Nigeria's rising inflation. But what caught the attention of the Senate more is the growing hunger in the country.
I believe at the moment now, we are at the threshold where nothing should be ruled out, because Nigerians want food. The hungry population is an angry population. And so we must do everything possible to put food on the table of Nigerians. I recognize the need for us to protect local production, but at the moment we are under an emergency.
Many other lawmakers, including Senator Simon Lalong and Ali Ndume, share in the sentiment. As a former Minister of Labour, Lalong holds the view that the hardship in the country could have been better managed if the arrangement to increase workers' salaries had been implemented on time.
Because most of the things that we are seeing today were all some of the things that Mr. President envisaged. And he said, as soon as we continue with implementation, it will reduce the pressure.
What it seems now is that people are just wallowing in a problem and they will drown all of us. So I suggest that we look at the issues, and the experts that we have here are even enough.
The high drama came as the Senate considered the ways and means borrowing of 30 trillion naira, out of which 22 trillion was borrowed from the central bank under former President Muhammadu Buhari. It was a borrowing that questioned the oversight functions of the 9th Senate, with Yobe State-born lawmaker Senator Ahmed Lawal in charge. Lawal was available to explain the Senate's action at the time, as calls intensified for an investigation into what Akpabio believes is a clear case of fiscal recklessness that has brought Nigeria's economy to where it is today.
We are saying what you did at that time has put the nation in more mess economically. And therefore, because of the current economic situation we have found ourselves, that there is need for us to look at the details and to know whether they were rightly spent. But then there is somebody that must make a statement on this issue.
It was not 30 trillion. It was 22, and then of course the one we had made it almost 23. So if we have a ways and means that is 30 today, that means something happened between then and now.
On foreign exchange management, the Senate expressed concern over Naira's continuous depreciation against the dollar. It resolved to probe an alleged invalid $2.4 billion transaction by the Central Bank of Nigeria, even as some lawmakers consider the raid of the EFCC on Bureau de Change on Monday as an act of desperation.
Naira moves on the 29th of January from 891 to 1,300, and on the 9th of February, when the committee met with the management of the economy, and it was 1,500. Yesterday, 1,700. As I speak, 1,800. Then we need something different to come.
The Senate also aligned itself with reports of its joint committee when it called for a thorough probe of 10 trillion naira anchor borrower scheme for rice farmers by the Apex Bank. Omo Bazwaye, Rise News.
All right, Rufai, so many important issues discussed in the Senate yesterday. Your take on some of these stories, especially the food crisis, and saying all options must be explored, including importation when necessary.
Sorry, I'll have to sing again this morning because we started with a song yesterday. It's a song of Wasiu Ayinde Marshall that says, Ekembeke sọ̀rọ̀, irọ́ ń parọ́ fúnrọ́, 23-24, lọ̀rọ̀ ilé ayé jẹ́. And I sang that song for Mr. Akpabio this morning. Mr. Akpabio was part of the last administration that got up to 23 trillion in Ways and Means. This Senate was the Senate that aided and abetted breaking the CBN Act by securitizing Ways and Means. This Senate was the Senate that supported financial recklessness when they increased the threshold in Fiscal Responsibility Act from 5% of Ways and Means from the prior revenue to 15%. This Senate. So it is this same Senate, and when I see people like the Senate President acting brand new, I am at sea to what is going on. He served in that administration, so he should also take the blame, just like Mr. Ndume. And for Mr. Ndume asking the question to say, we left 23 trillion Ways and Means, what happened? Have they forgotten that this current government also went to Ways and Means? The 7 trillion they got to be able to look at their supplementary budget and the other things they ran, they spent in the first 6 months. Where did they get the money from? So that's why it's 30 trillion in case they don't know. So both governments have heard. Is it not part of that same money that this same Senate got 160 million each for their lawmakers to buy cars? They didn't even buy Innoson or Nord or Nigerian-made cars. They went to buy Toyota. This same Senate. So they got out of the money. So when I'm hearing people ask, oh, what is 7 trillion? Is that not part of the bulk of what made up the supplementary? Is that not part of the bulk of what made up the supplementary? When we have recklessness, let's call it recklessness. And this same Senate President, he forgets that he served in the same last administration where the NDDC could not account for anything. And he was in charge in the NDDC ministry. Anyway, Senate has a right for their oversight. They will always do their oversight. Let them do it. Let them ask their questions. Let's get to the root of the matter. But your guess is as good as mine. We know what happened. Even with the anchor borrower scheme, you know what happened. It was still a lot of mismanagement here and there. And when we are asking questions today that where are the parties, nobody can answer those questions. So we all know what happens. And the Senate will just rigmarole it. I would have loved for the Senate to give us, or the House of Rep to give us a comprehensive report on what happened in the NDDC ministry, which investigation ended with Off Your Mic, which this same Senate President was part of. So they will do their oversight, they will give us their report, but it's just another talk shop. We deceive ourselves so much in this country.
All right.
Okay. I think the Ways and Means is the place to start from. Now, the Senate says it's going to probe 30 trillion Ways and Means. Under President Buhari, 22.7 trillion. As of January 2024, 7 trillion advances had also been taken by the Tinubu administration to fund deficit. But what has now happened is that we've been told by the CBN governor, Yemi Cardoso, that this new government is not going to engage in interventions through Ways and Means to fund deficit. Yesterday, Wale Edun, Minister of Finance, speaking at the conference on public wealth assets management organized by the Ministry of Finance Incorporated, made the same point that government is going to audit the 22.7 trillion under Buhari. And also the same day, the Senate of the Federal Republic was saying exactly the same thing. Now, two things here. One, the Buhari administration is being questioned. And that probe is a welcome development by the Nigerian people. That point has to be made. Because what happened under President Buhari, which was also continued till January this year by the Tinubu administration, is a violation of the CBN Act of 2007. Section 34 gives the CBN powers to make advances. But what they violated was Section 38, which says Securitization is not allowed. That you cannot settle the debt, the loans, by way of promissory note or securitization. Now the National Assembly that should be questioned is a night assembly that was led by Ahmad Lawan. Because in May, before the Buhari administration left, they approached the Senate to restructure the deficit, to restructure the ways and means advances. And that night assembly approved it. So it's not just probing the Buhari administration. It was good that Ahmad Lawan stood up and was talking and was saying the probe will not yield any result. How is he in a position to determine that? He was defending the illegality that the Senate that he led committed. And he was saying that it was an emergency and all that. And there were lawmakers who were in that night assembly who said they had asked for the details. Nobody till date brought any details. So nobody knows what was done with the ways and means. Did they use it to pay for debt repayment? Did they use it to fund interventions by the CBN? Nigerians have a right to know. That is the big question there. And Ahmad Lawan himself should be probed. What role did he play? So by standing up and speaking and all that, it was a case of self-indictment and an indictment of the night assembly and of the Buhari administration. When they are carrying out the probe, either from the Ministry of Finance end or the CBN end or the Senate end, the DMO, the Debt Management Office, should also be probed. The Debt Management Office issued an unthinkable memo defending the securitization in May 2023. The people who issued that memo, they are still in that DMO. What are they still doing there? So the probe should extend to them. These are the issues, in my view. The next issue is that the Tinubu administration has also put its own credibility on the line. And we hope that it will learn lessons from the same issues that have been raised by Cardoso, by Wale Edun, and also by the Senate yesterday. And what is this issue? That there will be no more interventions. And that they will not take anything to that National Assembly that they will say is very urgent. Urgent. Everything is very urgent. It's an emergency. And then people who call themselves lawmakers to make laws for the good of the country will just approve something as an emergency and they will not ask questions. And now the 10th Assembly wants to ask questions. So I hope Akpabio and his people will also learn lessons from the same thing that they are criticizing. Because many of the elements who voted yes in the 9th Assembly, they are still in that place today. So these are the key issues here. And then the final issue is that this probe, what will be the result? Ahmad Lawan says nothing will come out of it. Nigerians will expect that transparency and accountability will come out of it. The people's right to know will be defended. And that those who committed the illegality of the violation of Section 34 and Section 38 of the CBN Act of 2007 would be sanctioned. And those sanctions will be made public. As to the issue about food crisis, which the Senate expressed concern about, well, what we'll find here again is what I've always talked about, policy confusion. The executive is saying one thing, the Senate is saying one thing. Look, students of policy evaluation will tell you that policy evaluation talks about a process. Before you come up with a policy, you will have studied it, evaluated it, you will have considered public interest. It's not that one part of government will be talking this, the other person in government will be saying this. What are these people dealing with? Governance is about policy making, and they're just confused. So the Senate is saying something, the executive is saying something. Okay, what is that thing that they want to do exactly in public interest? Can they put their acts together as a party and as a government? So all this talking across purposes, I think it's very embarrassing. It's not what students of policy process, policy making, policy evaluation, will find interesting. And it's not about theory. It is what is practiced, governments all over the world.
All right, very quickly, because our time is far spent, I just want to touch on the Anchor program and the fact that they also mentioned, the Senate had also mentioned that this ought to be probed and investigated and to actually find out, evaluate the success or lack of that program. A number of, we have had conversations around some of the challenges that plague that program, whereby the loan defaults almost made the program be totally obsolete in terms of not even being effective at all. It would be important, as we are asking for the probe of principal players in the ways and means, or approval of ways and means, thereby violating terms set out in the Constitution, to also look at those who benefited from the Anchor Borrowers Program, and farmers or perhaps friends and cronies who were able to benefit from that program who didn't use the loan to what it was said to be used for. The Senate has started on a great note. However, as has been echoed and mentioned a number of times, it's not just about investigations. We're good at setting up committees, setting up investigation panels, even hiring forensic auditors. But what is the most important is that what the outcome of the report of this investigation does, and who are the people that take the fall when found culpable. Until we do this, then we're not ready to move forward. So yes, great proposal, or great proposal made by the Senate. However, the most important thing is what happens once this report is made, and also who is found culpable and what happens, so we do not continue with the reign of impunity.